Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time from March 12th, 2025. We're getting very close to our multi-day severe weather outbreak with the potential for some strong tornadoes. That'll start on Friday, heading into Saturday, and eventually we'll end up into the East Coast on Sunday. But we'll take a look at the severe weather outlook here for today on Wednesday. We do have a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale for portions of the Arklatex area. The potential for tornadoes cannot be ruled out, though it is small. This will be primarily more of a damaging wind and large hail event. As you can see, we have a hatched risk for large hail, which could include 2-inch sized hail or larger within a 25-mile radius in that area. We also have a little teeny bit of a severe risk for Thursday with a small chance for tornadoes in southeastern Alabama, but that'll definitely be a precursor to what we'll head over into Friday, which will be an expanded risk of severe weather, which could include 3 separate modes. The first one being a damaging wind with embedded tornado threat up in the northern half, a supercellular threat that'll eventually turn into a line, if you will, a line of tornadoes and wind that'll be into portions of Arkansas, southern Missouri, as well as into portions of Kentucky and Tennessee. And then the southern risk down here, which would involve some supercell tornadoes, tornadoes within supercells that could potentially be strong as well. And that risk will actually continue to move on through into Saturday, as that'll continue to move off into portions further into the deep south, as well as Dixie Alley, and eventually heading further into the southeast, which will continue to move its way further on Sunday. We do have the potential for some severe weather over here into portions of the Ohio Valley, heading over into the mid-Atlantic, so definitely something to watch out there as well. We'll try and go through some of the timings with the HRRR model. Remember, the top left-hand portion of your screen is where the timing is in Eastern. We'll move on through. You can see storms start to try and pop up sometime around, I'd say, 6 or 7, and they'll try to move on through further into southeastern Oklahoma, northeastern Texas. They're pretty much into all sorts of different thunderstorms that kind of just pop up with no regular organization. And it ends up becoming a little bit more of a squall line with maybe even some strong damaging winds that could try and move on through. Definitely an interesting little MCS, but it ends up kind of just wavering off just a little bit before we even head off into Thursday, with the potential of some storms that could try and develop into the late afternoon over here into portions of southeastern Alabama. That'll continue all the way through, and storms will continue to move its way off further to the east. We do have some moisture associated with this system, not a whole lot though, and that's kind of the reason, or at least one of the reasons, why this system isn't anticipated to be anything more than what it is. Usually you want dew points that are in upwards of about 60 into the area that we're watching. We have about mid-50s with low 60s towards the coastline, and that's not going to be able to advect up further north in time for these storms to really be able to get intense, or significant, I should say. The main reason, however, why some of these storms don't really gain a whole lot of traction, but also have a huge hail risk associated, is because there's a lot of dry air at the 700 millibar level. That's about, I'd say, 3-ish kilometers above ground level. And the reason why storms usually don't end up sustaining is because when you have a whole lot of dry air aloft with some, dry air, not really too dry, but it is kind of moist and it's kind of dry at the same time. It's in that middle ground at the surface. You really need to find that moisture somewhere in order for you to get precipitation to be able to fall from some of these thunderstorms. And usually aloft, whenever there is dry air, that also usually means that there is warm air associated with it. And so we have a little bit of an inversion. We have some way to limit lifting parcels from the surface to try and get further up into the atmosphere. It's almost kind of like someone put a lid on a steaming pot, and the pot isn't able to allow the steam to rise through the lid's just kind of holding it in place. So until that lid is lifted off of the pot, you don't really get a whole lot of stuff. But according to the HRRR model, there's a little bit of some holes that are in that lid that allows steam to kind of rise. And so you have some storms that end up trying to form, and that'll continue to basically move off further even into Thursday. But we do have some stuff that we want to update with you guys. We're going to try and speed run through this because we talked about this a lot yesterday with what some of the general environmental characteristics are with this event. But we're going to try and get through this relatively quickly. Remember, whenever you see a dip in the jet stream here in the 500 millibar wind shear, which is what we're currently looking at, that right there is a trough. Anytime it bulges out north and curls back down, this is what we like to call a ridge. And so let's move on through our first little system here. Not really as strong of a trough, but our second system you can clearly see is our significant one. This heads off into Friday. Very strong concentrated wind, but this is kind of the interesting thing here. So out in front of the 500 millibar wind shear, this is where you can get a lot of diffluence aloft. This creates a lot of gaps in the upper atmosphere that needs to be filled, and the only way for you to really fill it is with some rising air in some instances, and we do have some of that in some of these areas that are out in front of this trough. And so this is definitely something that hasn't really changed for the most part. It's just a lot of strong wind shear out in front of this event. We also have a lot of very strong low-level jet winds that actually start to move on through. You can see heading into Friday morning and into Friday afternoon, very strong low-level jet that extends all the way from portions of coastal Louisiana and up into the main risk. We got some consistent low-level jet winds in the orange and the reds, with even some browns and even some lighter tans to even some whites that are in this. And this basically shows that our low pressure system is starting to intensify as it moves off towards the north and east. But there's going to be a new low pressure system that's going to form just over here near the Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi area. And this is going to basically create some stronger low-level jet winds here, or more concentrated low-level jet winds for our second system on Saturday. I truly believe that Saturday is going to be the more significant event out of the 3 days that we're going to be talking about. And that'll continue to be the case as these low-level jet winds continue to push on through. Potentially some overnight severe thunderstorms that'll continue to move off across much of this risk area as this heads off into Sunday, where we do potentially see these storms continue to move off further and further, and we really kind of focus on more of maybe a strong damaging wind event as that continues to move about. We do have our jet streak. We mentioned this earlier yesterday, but usually out in front of the jet streak where the more concentrated, stronger winds are here at our 300 millibar level. This is very high up in the atmosphere. We usually typically look at the leading edge of this as to where there could potentially be some severe weather. So let's take that information, move it into Friday, and we have our jet streak here, our concentrated jet streak, to where we could potentially be seeing our concentrated severe weather, which would be out in front here. This is the reason why there is some severe weather at the northern risk. We'll be showing you guys the dew points here in some of these areas, and it's not exactly the greatest, but the main reason why the northern risk exists is because of that jet streak. There's a lot of gaps that need to be filled. There's a lot of wind that's going to be pushing through that area. And so because of that, there's just going to be a lot of severe weather that could exist in that general vicinity. But Saturday, well, Saturday, you can see our jet streak that starts to move on through into portions of the deep south. And on the leading edge of that is what we're going to want to watch out for the potential of severe weather. This, as I said, is going to be our classic area of severe weather that could be moving on through. And then heading into Sunday, once again, a lot of strong wind that starts to push in and move about that could really kind of just really force a lot of storms to move about and produce some strong damaging winds with that. Your dew points here heading into Thursday and into Friday. Once again, the moisture really starts to push off. Look at how well defined this low pressure system is, guys. You can see the moisture that is being wrapped all the way around with our dry air that's pushing on through. This setup here on Friday is a dry line setup. And what that basically means is instead of you having a cold front to where storms are forced and pushed about, we actually have two separate air masses into which is fighting for dominance, if you will, on both different sides. We have our moist atmosphere that's out in front and our dry atmosphere that's being pulled in by our low pressure system. And so because of that, you can find some concentrated areas of high moisture along this dry line that could essentially start to fire off some of your thunderstorms. And that's kind of the reason why you have this widespread risk of severe weather, is because it's all concentrated into one small area. Once the two different atmospheres kind of collide, that's where things really start to fire off. That's where things start to really become a little bit more intense. So definitely something to watch out for with that. We have our cold front that is lagging in behind this. This is going to try and slam into the event, and that'll basically, as soon as that happens, we'll start to see a lot of wind and, of course, our damaging wind in our QLCS tornado event. But this is right here, Saturday. Saturday, very much more widespread dew points. All right, before we didn't really have a whole lot of high dew points in the northern end of the risk. Here now, it looks like we do. We have about 60-degree dew points raging all the way up from Indiana and Ohio all the way down into Mississippi and Alabama. Very, very moist dew points over here, maybe in upwards of the mid to upper 60s. And something that I want to point out here as we get into the specifics, and of course we'll get into the real specifics of what I personally look out for in tomorrow's video, to where we actually get our very high-res models. We'll be able to go in-depth into all of that. But what I'm looking for here, at least onto portions of Saturday here, as we get into our dew points. Everyone here, all right, this is 18Z. This is midday here on Saturday. Everyone take a look. You see how these isobars here are pretty wavy across the board? These wavy isobars are not a great sign if you don't want severe weather. This basically tells you that this entire open warm sector is pretty disturbed. This is a lot of intense rising, a lot of vorticity in this area, and usually along these bends is where you could potentially get some of your storms to try and form. You can try and find these little short waves that try to actually develop here, which could be where some storms try to actually form and or try to sustain. And so anywhere within these little perturbations, any of these little intense areas of vorticity, if you get a storm to form out in this open warm sector, out in front of where the cold front would be, these storms do have the potential to become significant. These storms do have the potential to become rather robust, and they will more than likely produce your significant tornadoes. And you can see this just continues all the way through. We're talking 0Z, which is 7 o'clock later on that evening, heading over into 6Z. That is now 1 in the morning the next day. And you can see this still continues. We still have some robust short waves that move on through. This is definitely something that we'll have to pay attention to as this continues to move about further and further. In addition to that, we also have a lot of energy, a lot of buoyancy. Convective available potential energy, we're talking about that steam on that lid again. And this actually classifies as to how much steam we have on, in the atmosphere, how much rising, warm rising air that we got. In the open warm sector up here in the northern event on Friday, we do actually have a good bit, about 1,000 to 1,500, maybe even 1,800 joules per kilogram of convective available potential energy. So based off of that, the wind and the energy will be able to allow thunderstorms to form, move on through, and create your strong damaging winds with embedded tornadoes in that. In the southern risk, however, look at this. An abundance of energy that is available here. We're talking in portions of Louisiana and Texas, as well as even into portions of Arkansas. 2,000 to almost 2,500, maybe even a little bit shy of 3,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE that ends up sitting in this area and just builds. It builds. It builds. And this will continue to be the case all the way into Saturday, to where we have the potential for storms to try and form overnight. That's the reason why some of the energy bleeds out, if you will, and heads off into Saturday, to where you could potentially see some more energy across both of these areas. I do believe the Euro model is underdoing the amount of energy that is going to be in the portions of the deep south. There's other models that are saying it's actually going to be higher. In fact, the GFS although it is quite unreliable, and some of the other models are saying that there is indeed basically this level of energy here that gets transported into the same time frame of when the storms are actually forming. And so this is definitely something to watch out for, especially as we get into our high resolution models later on tonight with our video that'll be coming out tomorrow morning. But until then, let's take a look at the timing, see what we got here. Once again, there's going to be a lot of moisture that's going to be moving off across the coastline of the western United States, so definitely watch out for the potential of flash flooding, rock slides, mudslides, the typical shenanigans, as well as some heavy amounts of snow in the higher elevations. Our low pressure system starts to form off here on Friday night into Saturday. A lot of storms start to form, ranging from southwestern Minnesota all the way down into St. Louis. Definitely something to watch out for, some strong damaging winds, and as well as the potential for some tornadoes. Our supercell threat begins to try and develop down here in the portions of southeastern Missouri, as well as much of Arkansas and portions of Louisiana and Mississippi. This will continue to move off towards the east as our new system begins to try and develop here. The reason why the Euro cuts off a lot of that energy, a lot of that buoyancy, is because it actually has a lot of storms forming on Saturday morning. And if that continues to stay, if that actually comes into fruition, that is the only failure mode that I really see in Saturday. If you were to hope and pray that storms were to form in and around this area, and it does happen, it will do a massive dent into the intensity of these storms that are going to form on later on in Saturday evening, and that will basically be a good thing for the folks that live down there. But until then, storms continue to form here Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening. A lot of snow on the backside over here in the portions of the Dakotas, as well as portions of Minnesota. At one point, they see severe weather, and the next day, they see some snow. So talk about a real change in 24 hours. These storms continue to move off towards the east, a wide area of severe weather that continues to move off into Sunday morning, and then this will continue to move off further and further in towards the coastline as well. More precipitation is anticipated into the Pacific Northwest as well. Once again, the heightened risk for some flash floods is definitely possible before we could potentially be talking about our next system that'll move on through sometime around the 19th and the 20th of next week, to where we could potentially see some severe weather in the south, as well as some winter weather that is possible up in the north. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family on social media, especially to those who could potentially be in the path of this storm. Follow me on social media, link in the description down below. I will see you guys tomorrow morning, so make sure you guys stay safe until then, and everyone, peace out.